Gosh, that's a cheerful thought. Now, a little bit earlier, I spoke to the Vice President of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans. He's heading up their work for this climate conference where I'm sitting. So I began by asking him how much progress can really be made here when, what many would argue is the most important player in all of this, China's President Xi, hasn't turned up.
I think he's sent someone who's very capable, Mr. Xi Jinping, who has been dealing with these issues for 30 years, who was also instrumental in getting China on board in Paris. So I think we still have an opportunity to convince China to be bolder, both in terms of its emission reductions and its contributions to finding a solution on the many issues we still need to solve.
Now, if it isn't bolder and faster on phasing out coal, many would say it will then have a significant industrial commercial advantage when it comes to heavy industry like steel. Do you think that the West, European Union, UK, US, ought to impose greater tariffs on China in those circumstances?
Well, I believe what you will see in the Western world is the rapid deployment of what we call green steel. Steel made with hydrogen or with other means that are not based on carbon. And clean steel, green steel, whatever you want to call it, is going to have a competitive edge. And obviously, in many industries, we want green steel to take over. And I'm absolutely convinced that China will want to be part of that development. So what we need to do is to convince China to peak out as early as possible. They've said before 2030, well, the earlier the better. So let's hope we can convince them to peak out by 2025. If they were to do that, then we really have a chance of keeping 1.5 degrees alive.
If I go back to Paris for a second, one very striking thing that happened in Paris was that the French, who were the conveners then, managed to sort of, in a sense, form an alliance of poorer countries. And it was that alliance that got us the 2% and 1.5% global warming targets. This time, many of the poorer countries seem united against the richer countries, like the US, the UK and the EU, and are accusing us of not doing enough when it comes to financing their transition, the famous 100 billion, not doing enough on vaccines. Should more have been done much earlier on things like financial help for the developing countries? Because they then might have been able to put more moral pressure on, for example, China.
Well, the short answer to your question is yes. More should have been done earlier. But we can still do many things now. Many things were announced in the last couple of days. Quite a number of rich countries have announced more money on the table. Let's see what we can do in the next couple of days, in the next couple of weeks. Then the OECD can determine whether this will lead up to 100 billion. Now we will reach the 100 billion in 2023. If we increase our efforts, we might reach that number next year. And I think that would be a clear signal to the developing world that we mean business.
Now, this is plainly a moment when we need the whole world to pull together. So what do you make of the incredibly poor relations, seemingly on a different issue, mind you, between France and Britain?
Well, I do believe, I do understand how emotional everything is pertaining to fishers. That affects the UK just as much as it affects France and other EU member states. But I do believe that on the basis of the agreement that was reached previously, a way out could be found. And I think the last couple of days has shown willingness on all sides to find an agreement on this. And I hope we can show that in the next couple of days. Now, there's more's been going on. The AUKUS agreement was quite a surprise to many of us in the European Union or on the European continent. But, you know, at the end of the day, the strategic interests of the United Kingdom and the European Union coincide in so many areas. If you take a global perspective, it would be foolish on both sides to have this acrimonious relationship last any longer. We need to understand that whether it's the climate crisis, whether it's the rapidly changing geopolitical situation on a global level, we need each other. We need to stand together in so many issues, and I don't see why we wouldn't.
And so, while we're on this issue of tension, David Frost, the negotiator on the Northern Ireland Protocol with your colleague Maros Sefcovic, is saying that it is a red line for him that there should be no role for the European Court of Justice in the Northern Ireland Protocol, in the practicalities of it. Is it remotely possible that you could agree to that?
I think Mr. Frost knows very well that this is not possible for the European Union. I know he knows full well that whenever the internal market is involved, the ultimate arbitrator is the European Court of Justice. This is, I think, extremely well known in London. And instead of talking about red lines, I think it would be more productive to talk about the ideas the European Union came up with, ideas that were welcomed in Northern Ireland, of how to make things more practicable and easier to deal with. And I think those ideas, which again are meant to make life easier on the business community in Northern Ireland, especially on the citizens on the island of Ireland, should be embraced by the British government rather than talking about red lines.
But it looks to me as though if there is no flexibility there, the UK, Boris Johnson, will trigger Article 16, and that would lead to a calamitous deterioration in relations between the UK and EU, wouldn't it?
Well, as Yogi Berra would say, let's burn that bridge when we get there. No, joking aside, let's hope this doesn't happen. Let's hope we can find a way out. I believe the European Union has shown, the European Commission has shown clear willingness to find a compromise. I think we've been bending over backwards to offer a solution to the practicalities that people encountered in Northern Ireland. Let's focus on the people and the businesses in Northern Ireland instead of trying to score points off each other on certain issues. Let's try and solve this. I think a solution is within reach.
You wrote this remarkable love letter to the UK when we left the European Union. Would you write a similar love letter today?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would. Because my love letter was not directed at Mr. Frost nor at Mr. Johnson, frankly, but at the British people and at the people who granted me parts of my education, who helped me understand Shakespeare, who introduced me into this remarkable culture that is now part of who I am. So that's where my love and gratitude heads, not to individual politicians or political parties.
Mr. Timmermans, lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.